Noswaith dda. I'm Claire Morgan, one of the Strategic Director at Estyn. Thank you very much for joining us for another Estyn Live event on such a lovely evening. Today, we publish an important thematic report on school governors. And this evening is an opportunity for you to hear the main findings from the report and ask some questions from the HMI involved in writing the report. Now, if you'd like to watch this event in a different language, there's a button to switch languages at the top of the page, plus a link below this video. If you haven't already had a chance to read the report, you will find it on our website or by clicking the link in the chat box below the video. So let's make a start. I'd like to introduce you to two colleagues who've been involved in this work. Liz Council, HMI, is the author of the report, and we're also joined by Carwyn Jenkins, HMI, who's assisted Liz in gathering the evidence for the report. Liz and Carwyn will begin by sharing the main messages from the report with you, and then we'll be on hand to answer a few questions. If you have a question, please type it in the chat box below. We'll answer as many as we can after the main findings. Please feel free to ask questions in Welsh or English. But now I think I'll hand over to Liz.
Diolch yn fawr, Claire. We're delighted to have this opportunity this evening to share our findings from our thematic report. We wrote this report following a request for advice from the Education Minister as part of his remit letter to Estyn for this academic year. It's what we call a State of the Nation report, which means that based on our evidence, we've reported on the strengths and also the shortcomings in the work of governing bodies. The focus has been on what makes a governing body effective, with a particular look at governors' role as a critical friend, and also the impact of training that governors have received on their work. Next slide, please. We collected evidence from a wide range of different sources. Firstly, we looked at a sample of inspection reports from the last 5 years and analysed them. We then undertook virtual interviews with head teachers and groups of governors in 41 different schools from right across the country. We also held interviews with representatives from other key organisations who work with governors on a regular basis. And finally, we issued an online survey to 250 different schools, and we analysed the 363 responses that we received. Next slide, please. I'd like now to share a brief overview of our main findings based on the evidence that we collected. Firstly, we found that most governors are enthusiastic volunteers who are very committed to the role that they play in their school. Many have helped establish the school's vision, often working in conjunction with school staff, pupils, parents, and other stakeholders. Many governors have a good understanding of the particular needs of the different communities in which their school serves. Next slide, please. Most governors have a broad understanding of their school's priorities for improvement. In most schools, governors get regular updates on the progress that the school is making towards meeting these priorities, usually through head teacher reports and other presentations. However, we did find that in too many schools, governors do not observe the progress that the school is making towards meeting their priorities firsthand. The majority of governors ensure that they manage school finances well, and they spend their money beneficially to benefit their pupils. A majority of governing bodies do not regularly audit their members' skills. And this means they don't always have an up-to-date picture of the skills and experiences of each member of the body. Next slide, please. The support and advice that governors receive from local authorities and school improvement services is too variable, and this includes training opportunities. In addition, governors do not always evaluate the impact of any training that they receive well enough. In most schools, governing bodies have suitable committee structures, but they don't always reflect the needs of the school. In the best practice, schools regularly look at the structure of their committees and adapt them so they can address both school priorities and national priorities. Next slide, please. Most governors have a good understanding of national priorities, for example, the curriculum for Wales and changes to ALN laws, and they understand the implication for their school. Most receive regular and relevant safeguarding training, and they understand their role in keeping pupils safe. However, not all governing bodies are aware of all their statutory obligations. For example, their role in ensuring that the school adheres to healthy eating and drinking. Only a minority of governing bodies self-evaluate their own work often enough. And this means that they don't always have an accurate picture of their strengths and areas that they need to address to improve. I'm now going to hand over to Carwyn, who will talk about our recommendations. He will do it through the medium of Welsh. Diolch yn fawr, Carwyn.
Diolch, Liz. Yn dilyn canfyddiadau o'r arolwg yma, rydym wedi gwneud argymhellion ar gyfer ysgolion a chyrff llywodraethol i awdurdodau lleol a gwasanaethau gwella ysgolion, ac hefyd i Lywodraeth Cymru. Yn gyntaf, os ydym yn edrych ar yr argymhellion i ysgolion a chyrff llywodraethol, rydym wedi argymell y dylai ysgolion a chyrff llywodraethol gwella gallu'r llywodraethwyr i herio uwcharweinwyr am bob agwedd o waith yr ysgol. Yn ail, dylai cyrff llywodraethol sicrhau bod llywodraethwyr yn cael cyfleoedd rheolaidd a gwerthchweil i arsylwi drostynt eu hunain y cynnydd y mae'r ysgol yn ei wneud tuag at gyflawni ei blaenoriaethau ar gyfer gwella. Dylai cyrff llywodraethol cynnal hunanwerthusiad rheolaidd o'i gwaith ei hunain i'w helpu i nodi eu cryfderau a'i meysydd i wella. A'r pedwerydd argymhelliad yw i lywodraethwyr werthuso effaith hyfforddiant ar ei rôl fel arweinwyr strategol effeithiol, ac i nodi anghenion hyfforddiant yn y dyfodol. Sleid nesaf, os gwelwch yn dda. Rydym wedi gwneud 3 argymhelliad ar gyfer awdurdodau lleol a gwasanaethau gwella ysgolion. Yn gyntaf, dylent werthuso ansawdd eu hyfforddiant ar gyfer llywodraethwyr yn fwy trylwyr, a hefyd gwella hyn lle bo angen. Yn ail, dylent gydweithio i sicrhau bod mwy o gydlyniad a chysondeb wrth ddarparu cyfleoedd am hyfforddiant o ansawdd uchel ar draws Cymru. Ar hyn o bryd, mae hyn yn rhy anghyson. Yn olaf, rydym yn argymell y dylent ddarparu cymorth a chyngor mwy effeithiol i gyrff llywodraethol i'w helpu yn ei rôl fel arweinwyr strategol effeithiol. Sleid nesaf, os gwelwch yn dda. Rydym hefyd wedi nodi 3 argymhelliad ar gyfer Llywodraeth Cymru. Yn gyntaf, dylent ddiweddaru'r canllawiau ar gyfer awdurdodau lleol ar beth yw gynnwys wrth hyfforddi llywodraethwyr ysgolion, mwyn iddynt ddeall rôl data wrth gefnogi hunanwerthuso a gwella mewn ysgolion. Mae hyn yn unol ar newidiadau cenedlaethol i arferion asesu mewn ysgolion. Nesaf, dylent cynnyrchu deunydd i annog ystod ehangach o rieni i ddod yn llywodraethwyr, yn enwedig rhai o gefndiroedd lleiafrifoedd ethnig. Yn olaf, rydyn argymell bod Llywodraeth Cymru yn llunio fframwaith cymhwysedd i helpu cyrff llywodraethol i wella ei heffeithiolrwydd. Liz.
Diolch, Carwyn. That was a very quick summary of our main findings and our recommendations. We hope that you found it both useful and informative. Obviously, there's a lot more detail in our report, which you'll be able to find on our website and in the link in the chat. I'm going to hand back to Claire now, and she's going to take some questions for us to answer in the remaining time available. Diolch, Claire.
Thanks, Liz. We've got some interesting questions coming through on the chat. The first one is, how could the work of governing bodies help support schools to improve? Would you like to take that one, Liz?
Yes, that's fine, Claire, thank you. That's a really good question. Supporting school improvement is a really important part of governors as strategic leaders of the school. We mustn't forget, first of all, that governors are volunteers, and also most governors do not have an educational background. And it's really important to remember that they're not there to make judgments on teaching and learning. That is not their role. However, there are lots of other things that they can do to help support school improvement. In our evidence gathering, we saw some really good examples of this, along with perhaps some weaker practice. In our strongest governing bodies, governors receive a wealth of information from head teachers and other senior leaders, and quite often they ask for additional evidence as well. But they also are regular visitors to the school to gain first-hand information for themselves. And they use these visits to make sure that they can gather information linked to school improvement priorities. Again, as I said, it's not their job to go into classrooms and make judgments on the quality of teaching and learning, but there's lots of other activities they can take part in. And if you read in our report, there are lots of really good examples of where governors successfully do this. In these schools, governors also ask some very well-targeted questions of leaders. However, there are weaker schools where perhaps this aspect of their work isn't so well developed, and they do need some further training and support. In these schools, they often rely too heavily on information that they receive from school leaders, and quite often maybe have a too positive a picture of the school's performance. They don't use visits to the schools well enough to look at important aspects that the school has chosen as their aspects that they wish to improve. As I've said, we've got lots of information in our report which will help schools hopefully look at what they're currently doing and see if they can use some of our cameos of good practice to help them improve their role further. And diolch, Claire.
Thanks, Liz. We've got another one here. It's a Welsh question, but it's about how governors are able to challenge senior leaders effectively to help drive school improvement. So Carwyn, the English translation is, what are the reasons that only a minority of governors are able to challenge senior leaders effectively to help drive school improvement?
Diolch, Claire. Wel, roedd yr adroddiad wedi darganfod pan fod cyrff llywodraethol yn effeithiol bod gan y llywodraethwyr o fewn y cyrff yma y sgiliau a'r wybodaeth i gallu herio uwcharweinwyr mwyn rhoi cymorth i'r ysgol i sicrhau gwelliant. Fodd bynnag, beth o'n i wedi darganfod, yn y mwyafrif o ysgolion, nid oedd yn ymddangos bod gan llawer o'r llywodraethwyr y sgiliau a'r wybodaeth i ymgymryd ar ôl yn effeithiol. A fi'n credu bod yn cysylltu nôl yn ychydig i beth oedd Liz yn cyfeirio. Ac mae gan leiafrif o lywodraethwyr ddealltwriaeth ansicr o sut i herio'n effeithiol. Yn aml, maen nhw'n gofyn cwestiynau jyst am eglurhad ac yn teimlo bod nhw'n herio ac mae angen edrych ar hynny. A mae'n ymddangos bod angen eto mwy o hyfforddiant i lywodraethwyr ar sut i herio uwcharweinwyr yn fwy effeithiol. A hefyd, mae angen nhw deall pa fath o gwestiynau sydd angen nhw i ofyn i'r arweinwyr. Yn ogystal, mewn ysgolion gwanach, yn aml, nid oes gan y llywodraethwyr digon o wybodaeth i galluogi nhw i herio uwcharweinwyr yn effeithiol. Enghraifft, efallai bod diffyg dealltwriaeth gyda ni o sut mae'r ysgol yn gweithredu. Diffyg dealltwriaeth alle o ran yr addysg, sut mae addysg yn cael ei trefnu, neu mae'n ansicr o'r safonau dylen nhw fod yn disgwyl o ddisgyblion wrth mynd i'r sylwi. Yn aml, mae'r llywodraethwyr yn orddibynnol ar y wybodaeth sy'n cael ei darparu iddynt gan uwcharweinwyr ac nid ydynt yn chwilio am wybodaeth uniongyrchol drostyn nhw eu hunain.
Diolch, Carwyn. There's another one here, probably for you, Liz. You say that the quality of training provided for governors varies too greatly. What can be done to improve this?
Yes, thank you, Claire. That's what we did find out. Governors told us, and bearing in mind that we interacted with schools from right across the country, that both the availability, the quality and the relevance of training for their individual needs did vary too greatly across the country. And that's from local authorities and school improvement services. I'm not talking about outside organisations which necessarily do provide training as well. We have made some recommendations, as Cameron has already shared with you, that local authorities and school improvement services need to evaluate what they currently offer and to make improvements where needed. We also suggest that they should work more collaboratively together to share good practice, to ensure that it doesn't matter where governors are based in Wales, that they still get the same access to a range of high quality training experiences, some generic, and there's some good practice of local authorities and regional services who provide bespoke training for individual governing bodies, which governors really appreciate at a cluster level or at an individual school level. We've also made recommendation for schools for governing governors to evaluate the training that they receive more rigorously and to identify future training needs. The picture was very variable in terms of what governors were asked to do once they had attended training. In the best practice, they were asked to share that training with other governors to maybe write a report, to do an evaluation. And also in some of our stronger governing bodies, governors actively seek out training that they need, either as a whole governing body or as individuals or groups. Lots of governing bodies have a nominated training governor, and it's an agendaed item for every governing body meeting. And some of those training governors told us stories of where they wouldn't let it lie, and they appreciated it was quite difficult for governors to attend training. But having said that, since the pandemic, a lot of training now is recorded, and governors appreciated being able to access more training online at a time that's more convenient for them, which helps them because we are aware, you know, most of our governors do work, and we keep saying they are volunteers and they do a very, very good job for us in our schools.
Thanks, Liz. There's another question here about schools having difficulties recruiting people to serve on the governing body. What in this report could be used to encourage someone who's thinking of becoming a governor to undertake the role? And what can governing bodies do to ensure they reflect better the diverse communities they serve? This one is being put in Welsh, Carwyn. So could I ask you to answer this one?
No problem. Wel, fel ni wedi sôn yn barod, mae e'n rôl wirfoddol, ac mae gallu ysgol i ddenu llywodraethwyr yn amrywio'n fawr ar draws y wlad. Nid yw rai ysgolion yn cael unrhyw anhawster denu pobl o ansawdd uchel i ymuno a'u corff llywodraethol, ac o ganlyniad, mae'r amrywiaeth a'r sgiliau sydd ar y corff llywodraethol yna yn helpu symud yr ysgol yn ei blaen. Fodd bynnag, mewn ysgolion eraill, ni'n gweld, neu mae llywodraethwyr wedi bod yn dweud, eu bod nhw yn cael anhawster i lenwi swyddi gwag neu lleoliadau gwag ar y corff llywodraethol. Ac o ganlyniad, nid ydyn nhw'n dueddol o gael cydbwysedd da o sgiliau mwyn helpu a chefnogi yr ysgol yn effeithiol. Yn yr adroddiad, mae yna rai enghreifftiau o arfer da iawn lle mae yna ysgolion unigol ac awdurdodau lleol wedi annog ystod eang o bobl i wneud cais i fod yn llywodraethwyr. Enghraifft, yn Abertawe, yn awdurdod lleol Abertawe, mae yna ymgyrch i recriwtio llywodraethwyr o wahanol gefndiroedd ethnig lleiafrifol. Un o'r argymhellion hefyd yw i Llywodraeth Cymru i gynhyrchu mwy o wybodaeth mwyn annog rieni i wneud cais i ddod yn llywodraethwyr ysgol. Eto, yn enwedig o ran y rhai o wahanol cefndiroedd ethnig lleiafrifol. Mwyn sicrhau bod cyrff llywodraethwyr yn adlewyrchiad cywir o'r gymuned mae'r ysgol ei hunain yn ei gwasanaethu.
Diolch, Carwyn. Okay, we'll move on to another question. This is, how would you suggest that governors observe progress firsthand, as these are volunteers who are not education professionals? Liz, would you like to take that one?
Yes, thank you, Claire. And, as we said many times, we do appreciate governors are volunteers and they are so committed to the role that we play. And I know everyone in education is very grateful for them giving up their time. Two aspects of that really. If governors are working full time, again, we appreciate, as schools I'm sure do, it's difficult to get time off to make visits during the school day. Lots of governors do manage it. Lots of governing bodies discuss this and perhaps ask governors to commit to perhaps a half a day a year to come into school to observe what's happening. Lots of organisations do give governors time off if they've got a policy where they allow volunteering work. I know in my experience, governors are able to use that time off to undertake their role as governors. There are lots of other ways, however, that they can look at first-hand evidence, not necessarily just during the school day. There are lots of examples of where pupils come to governing body meetings and they really enjoy that, as well as the governors enjoy having the chance to interact with them and they can talk to pupils. Not just senior leaders attending meetings, other groups of staff, including support staff, attending meetings and governors having informal opportunities to chat to them about their role in the school and about their work. And that is, again, first-hand evidence, not relying just on reports. There are lots of examples, and again, they're in our report, of where specific days are organised on an annual basis, where governors are invited to spend time with staff. Staff may bring pupils' work along. Again, opportunities to talk to pupils, to talk to staff, look at resources, if perhaps the school has invested heavily in perhaps reading material, to chat to pupils about the difference that this has made. So there are lots of different ways that governors can get first-hand evidence other than just making visits to the school during the school day. But I totally agree, you know, we do all understand that it's not always as straightforward, and there will always be some governors, perhaps who are retired or perhaps work a bit more flexibly, who would be able to attend school more regularly. But you know, governing bodies do understand this, and I know most governing bodies recognise that it is more difficult for some governors, and so they have to be more flexible, but there are ways around it. Diolch,
Thanks,
Claire.
Liz. Thank you. We have a question about strong support for governors and school improvement services. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about what governors told us that they find useful in terms of training and support.
Thank you, Claire. Yes, you know, as I've already mentioned, there are some really strong examples out there. The Education Achievement Service, the EAS, what was impressive about them is they see school governors as leaders alongside other school senior leaders, alongside the senior leadership team, and they arrange a wide range of training, including some generic training, some of the mandatory training plus optional courses, but also bespoke training that governors can buy into for their individual school. And schools in that region do appreciate that they're able to have that training at a time to suit them. And it really is very bespoke for their governing body. Others, Ceredigion local authority, they provide some very beneficial training for governors in that local authority. What some governors particularly liked was sessions they do on asking the right questions, asking challenging questions, what challenge actually looks like. There are also some other private organisations which governing bodies can pay into to get a subscription to access some real high quality training as well. So I think it's when local authorities, school improvement services listen to schools, and we talked about them evaluating and perhaps building a bit more on that, to what schools actually need and what governing bodies actually need to help support them and advise them and put on training and other events, which is really beneficial for them.
Thank you very much, Liz. We've run out of time for any more questions, but we will take I think there's 2 or 3 that we can't get to, but we will draft answers to those and share them on social media. And if you have any further questions, please still continue to add them now to the chat and we'll pick those up as well. So just a couple of things to conclude as we come to the end. Thank you all for joining us this evening, and thank you also to Liz and Carwyn for taking us through the report. This is only our 4th Estyn Live event, so if you have any feedback for us, as always, that would be really, really welcome. Please can I encourage you to complete the interactive poll now on the screen and share your thoughts about how we can improve these events. As you know, we publish quite a few thematic reports, so let us know if you're finding them useful. Keep an eye on our social media because later this term we'll be publishing our peer-on-peer sexual harassment in FE and HE report, and also a report on supporting learners who are educated other than at school, IOTUS. Also, if you're at the Eisteddfod next week, please pop along and see us. We're on stand 31 to 41, because we'll be starting the conversation about our plans for inspection in 2024. So come along and say hello. So on behalf of myself, Liz and Carwyn and the team at Estyn, diolch yn fawr I chi gyd. Thanks for joining us tonight, and we hope you have a well-deserved long bank holiday weekend.